911, what is your emergency?
Units respond code 3 to a 1050 on the highway. Vehicles are blocking multiple
We're en route
lanes
to the
of travel.
hospital. Patient is currently having
We've got a
cardiac
4-alarm
arrest and has
fire
been
here.
intubated.
Send
Protesters
additional
are outside
trucks.
of City Hall and they are not complying with our
Out on
orders
1,
to
hold the
disperse.
air.
In a rapidly changing world for first responders, where it seems that every day the rules and norms are changing, there is one voice you can count on to give you the latest in emergency news. That is Lifeline. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lifeline 911 podcast with your host, Erica.
Hello.
I'm your co-host, Gary, and today we are going to be talking about the invisible line.
The invisible line.
So a lot of times people talk about an invisible line in a communications center. What exactly are they referring to?
I think they're referring to, well, obviously the invisible line, the line that you can't see between the two disciplines. And for me, that is, I think about call takers and dispatchers. And if you're in a center like ours, where the disciplines are actually separate, unlike some smaller agencies where they do everything, you could literally spend half your day doing one and the other half doing the other. Or if you're really small, you're doing both.
At the same time.
At the same time. And here, that's not the case. The 911 operator, like we talked about in other episodes, but if you're just joining us for the first time, the disciplines are separate. The 911 operator is the entry point into our agency, and most agencies it's like that. You will learn that first, and then you will progress to radio or dispatch, and that's where it gets a little interesting here.
Yeah, because I think there definitely is a sort of divide in the thinking, the perceived authority, at least,
Yes.
of
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
those that take 911 calls versus those that dispatch on them. And it's never really made much sense to me because we're all here to, do the same job to help out the citizens.
Yeah.
But for some reason, usually like people that are taking the 911 calls, feel or are made to feel somewhat subservient to
Yes.
the people that are dispatching on those same calls.
That is the absolute truth. And I think I was telling you, which was really we had thought about doing this subject, but we hadn't really got there yet. But I had a conversation with someone here in our own center who is a dispatcher, and we got on the subject of it. And she was very honest with me, and while I knew it existed, it was another animal altogether to hear it said out loud. She said the hard part out loud, and she said, quite frankly, that she always felt like the operators were beneath her. Mm-hmm. That's the word she used. And she wasn't ugly. I want to make that clear. She wasn't being ugly. She was just saying what we know to be true for a lot of our dispatchers here when they think about the person on the other side of the house, which is very, very sad to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you've got, as I said, like, both people, both those taking the incoming calls and then those sending those calls out to the officers, their purpose should be aligned in terms of trying to get the correct amount of help to the right location to help out and hopefully catch the bad guy, save a life, prevent property damage, what have you. But there is sort of this idea that permeates at least centers that have a clear demarcation between call takers and dispatchers.
Yeah.
I have not worked in one that everybody does everything, but I assume that would really kind of help alleviate a lot of that.
Yeah, and neither have I. Between my two centers, that has always been the case, where you come in and you have one discipline and the other is what would be considered a promotion, which I get where some of that comes from, because you are coming in as a 911 operator. That is the entry point to it, but it is in no way less than. Mm-hmm. And I find myself always trying to, because, you and I are supervisors, so we deal with both. We have both under our charge, if you will.
Yes, we have the power and the glory of being supervisors.
Yes, that's what they tell us anyway. I don't know. I have yet to see it, but that's okay. But we do have the responsibility for both. So for us, at least for me, I know for sure, I don't see them as one being more or less than the other. I just see them as different. Because they have different goals, they have different metrics that we judge them on, rate them by. I mean, yes and no, but obviously when you're taking calls, it's the one call that you're dealing with. When as a dispatcher, you're on all the calls in one way or another. And you said it beautifully before about having all of your plates spinning, and you're having to touch each one just to make sure they don't fall down. Well, that's the life of a dispatcher because they're moving parts, I think is another way to put it. But not more important because nothing happens until we pick up the phone.
Right.
So it has always baffled me where that comes from. And I think if anybody's listening to this and you work in a center like that, or you might even be one of our own colleagues, I would just hope that we would get to a place where we start to realize that we are colleagues before we are anything else. And none of us gets this job done without the other.
Right.
It's quite literally impossible to do.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be way too much work. And speaking of work, so the type of work that the call taker does and the dispatcher is very dissimilar, I think. They're quite different.
Quite different.
Like it's very, very different skill sets.
Yeah.
So the call takers are generally focused on taking one call in succession of the next, of the next, of the next.
Yeah.
Whereas the dispatchers have a whole bunch of calls happening all at the same time. So the dispatchers have to be a little bit more, I don't want to use the word multitask, but
Switch.
The switch task. That's what they call it these days.
Yep. That's actually what it's always been. We just never called it that.
Yeah. So they have to be much more switch task. But it's not necessarily harder. I mean, it is a different skill set.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of people that can do dispatch and do dispatch very well that would never succeed taking 911 calls.
Yep, and vice versa.
Yeah, and it's just, where your personality kind of fits. And, that's not a knock on either side.
Nope.
It's just different areas that you're focusing on and you're working toward when you take a 911 call or when you're dispatching on it.
Yep, absolutely. And I know we have some people here that have begun with our newer generation. Well, actually, you know what? Let me back up. With the newer generation, I'm seeing that line being erased just a little because we oftentimes now are having combined classes.
Yeah.
Where we have half of the people or 2 or 3 of the people are dispatchers and 5 or 6 of them are call takers. I mean, obviously they're not that big, but you know what I'm saying. It's kind of a half and half. And so they're going through the classroom portion together. So they begin their careers together.
Right.
Which I think is the absolute best way to do it. I know we can't do it that way all the time, but I think that's the best because they have to learn alongside each other. And so they come in hand and they exit the classroom hand in hand. And I think that camaraderie and that respect for the other's discipline is instilled in that moment when they're doing the classroom together. So I think it is harder for that separation I think it's harder for that to happen as they're in the class together, but I have also seen it develop after they exit the classroom.
Yeah. And I mean, having that closeness, that tightness, that teamwork, as like a call taker, you'll have a better idea of what kinds of things the dispatcher and by extension the officer is going to need to know. And like if you get a question from dispatch, like confirm like direction of travel or something.
Yeah.
You won't take it like personally. It's like, that's the primary thing the officer needs to know at that moment of the call.
In that
or whatever.
moment, yeah. And when they've spent some time together
Mm-hmm.
talking shop, if you will, about the differences in their roles,
Mm-hmm.
there's less room, I would imagine, for ego and
Yeah.
for them to begin to feel as though they're being attacked
Mm-hmm.
if the question is asked in the call. So I'm happy to know that it is getting better in some ways, but when you started talking about your older generations, it is your old goats like myself, 20 plus years, that it's ingrained, and so it's hard to battle that. Because we have people here now that still do not talk to call takers because they're over there and I'm over here.
Yeah. And I mean, kind of going on from, what is that invisible line to more like what creates that invisible line. We kind of talked about, different job responsibilities, but it's also, even though like, at least where we work, you may work in the same room, the same building as the person. A lot of times you're not going to really interact very much because we don't, in our profession, we don't all go out to lunch together.
Right.
We don't all go mix and mingle.
Right.
And even though there's no like wall in the building separating them, it's just you very rarely will see, people on like a dispatcher on the call taker side of the room and vice versa.
Yeah.
Because there's just not a whole lot of methods of interaction aside from just sending a message.
And they have to be intentional in crossing that line. And I found out very recently that we have a group of younger call takers and dispatchers that actually have formed a little club, if you will, and they actually go to breakfast after their night shift is over.
Mm-hmm.
And they all sit down and they have found that they will discuss calls that they've taken, and they find that, I was on that call and I took that call, and then one young lady actually told me that her and one of the call taker friends that they were at breakfast together, they ended up dissecting the call almost like a debrief.
Yeah, little bitty debrief.
It was like a debrief, and I don't even think she realized what she was describing to me, but it really was a debrief.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not poking at each other. They're just saying, okay, this is what it was like for me on that side of the call, and this is what it was like for me on this side of the call. And before you know it, now they've kind of got like a partnership, if you will.
Mm-hmm. A better understanding. Of one another.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's, I think, really critical to kind of breaking that down because it's tough. Because I remember when I was a dispatcher, we'd get off a night shift and we'd go out and allegedly order drinks, right at 7 a.m. and talk and stuff. But there weren't a lot of call takers that went out with us.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot of it, I think, is just maybe personality, because you tend to have different types of personalities go into call taking than you do dispatching.
True.
And like a lot of the times they're, people realize like, yeah, I wouldn't be good at call taking because I don't have the patience to do it.
Yeah.
And then sometimes call takers might be like, I can't do dispatching because I can't do the switch tasking so much. It's something they can learn to do.
Absolutely.
Both ends of that. But they feel more comfortable with, where they settle.
And I think it becomes a human nature thing too. Mm-hmm. You gravitate to likeness. Mm-hmm. You gravitate towards what is similar and what is familiar to you. And so if you are surrounded by and you interact mostly with dispatchers all day, then to some degree, I would imagine it just doesn't cross your mind. It's not really on purpose. I mean, now we do have those which we dealt with in the very beginning, but I would like to believe that is not the norm, right? That's not the majority of them that feel as though there is a lesser on one side of the house than the other. But I think it's just human nature for you to hang around with what is comfortable for you. Because something as simple as ordering food. I was guilty of this for quite a while. I would come in, and I was known as Starvin' Marvin there for a little while, because I would come in, and the first order of business for me was to send a message. Okay, who's ordering?
Yep.
That is sometimes that's still the case. Sometimes it is. And for the longest time, I would only send it so that the dispatchers would see it.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, and I do not know if it was a supervisor or a lead, but somebody responded back to me when I didn't get a response from anyone else saying that they were ordering. This person said, "Why don't you cast your net wider?"
Mm-hmm.
And I went, "Huh? What?" The thought,
Yeah.
duh, the thought never crossed my mind. She said, "Cast your net wider. Somebody on the call taking side might be wanting to order."
Yeah.
Ding. Sent the message out, and I kid you not, I think by the time it was over, there's 4 or 5 of us
Wow. Okay.
on this order.
Yeah.
But that, to me, is where it began for me to think about, wow, that line is there, and nobody knows where it came from.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I would say that it's not, not just a problem specific to emergency call centers. Like, I remember I used to work in a grocery store. That was my first job, and I was a cashier. And like, some of the cashiers look down on the bag boys or the baggers, and it's
Yeah.
like, everybody here
That's
is
true.
and I think, or like, I don't know, the wait staff may look down on the bus boys who are
Yeah.
looked down on by the hostess,
Yeah,
so
that's true.
again, it's kind of just that people, as you were saying, people like to be with people they feel are their own like rank or grade, I
Yeah,
suppose.
yeah.
So, but it's in any business, and especially in ours in particular, since it's such a important one to work together in,
Yeah.
you have to consciously try and break that down.
I agree.
And we have started to do some things here to try and make that happen. So you'd already kind of talked about joint classroom training, where you've got call takers and dispatchers in sort of the same class. But we also have something called a welcome wagon.
We do, and actually the welcome wagon is under construction
Yes.
again. And I think it is, so what it really is the goal is to have a number of people from both sides of the house, all shifts, welcoming on the same team, come together and build a bridge from the unknown to life at this huge building that we all work in, because it's massive, it's intimidating. You walk in here and you go, holy mother of crap, it's huge.
Right.
You know no one, and the goal is to have like-minded individuals trying to bridge that gap, and we are purposeful, or we hope to be, make sure that the call takers on the team will interact with the dispatchers coming in, and vice versa, that there is no, you only speak to this kind and you only speak to that kind. And so we are having to revamp it again, because people fall off and they move away, and they, go out into the world to pursue other opportunities.
Right,
and
yeah.
just the natural way of things. But we're hoping to do something with that.
Yeah, it's one way of kind of getting more engagement from
Yeah.
both sides of the house, because, we do try on occasion to we tried a bowling night a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
I think 2 people came to that. So,
But I remember a bowling thing we had some years back,
yeah.
and that's where I fell in love with the tostada.
Yes.
I loved them. I did not know that I loved them until we went to Dart Bowl that particular time, and I was doing the
that's not even
granny
around
roll.
anymore.
And I think somebody has a picture of me with my hindsight in the air trying to do the granny roll.
Yeah, I think that's me. That
I
has
think
that
you
picture.
have
Yeah.
that picture. Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah. Maybe I'll put it up on the Facebook
Please
group.
do not do that. It will be a bad set of circumstances for you. And actually, you know what? You're right about the welcome wagon. Backing up just a little bit, we do from time to time put out drinks, and we'll often do pastries or some sort of a
Non-alcoholic drinks.
yes, coffee, tea, cocoa, that kind of thing, and it's put on by the welcome wagon. And the goal is at least once a month, but depending on what's going on, like right now, South by, it's not happening. It's too much is going on. But we try to do that, and it causes everybody to have to come to the table to fix their preferred drink and kind of the water cooler type of thing.
Yeah.
And everybody meets up at the table and you strike up conversation as you're pouring your tea and sugar and whatnot.
Yeah, because it's just, again, kind of going back to what builds that invisible line, it's just so hard, I think, to find time in the workday to have water cooler time. Because, you know, if like you're on lunch, like most of the time, like I eat at my desk, you know, it's not like I go sit down in the break room.
That's true.
Because you just have a lot to do. And it just, and then like by the end of the day, a lot of the times you can be so, you know, mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted.
Yeah.
You don't really want to go out and do anything. But those are such important things to do in order to build that, you know, those bonds. Because when I first started here, we kind of called it like a family. It's like a family.
Yeah.
And as we've kind of grown and gotten larger, like I think a sense of that has kind of fallen off.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that the Welcome Wagon is trying to do, is trying to bring that back of like, hey, we're a team, you know,
Yes.
we're working together.
That is definitely the goal. And it's interesting because we do have people that are embracing it. Because I had a young lady walk up to me and hand me a $10 bill, and she was like, hey, this is for the Welcome Wagon. And she's brand spanking new. I didn't even know she knew about it.
Yeah.
Not that it's a secret, of course, but she's like, I just think that is so neat that we have the coffee and the tea and cocoa, and it's there for everyone. And she was just like, I'm on board. So, but, you know, I really do want to say, for all of the invisible line that we're talking about, make no mistake, at least here, and I'm sure this is true just about anywhere, when things get thick, when it gets crazy, if we find out that one of our own is in need of something, it is all hands on deck, and there is no difference in rank or whether you're a call taker 1, 2, 3, or dispatcher 1, 2, 3, soup, lead, it doesn't matter. They step over that invisible line with no hesitation. But then, of course, when the crisis is over,
Yep.
sometimes we look around and you're like, what happened to all this love? It's
Yeah,
gone.
where did that camaraderie go?
Where did it go? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just how do you kind of maintain that? Because, you know, you don't want to just be in a constant state of crisis. That's no fun.
No. And we're not talking about either everybody meeting up at the proverbial water cooler and singing Kumbaya like crazy people all day long and,
Right.
and walking around holding hands and stuff. That's retarded. But we're just looking for, I think for me, I would just like to see less of that mentality. And I don't know how you get there. But I think it's most important for us to remember that we are all here to serve. And in doing so, we serve together. And I like to look at it like a marriage, right? In a marriage or relationship even, each person in the relationship has their role in it. One is not more important than the other. They're just different.
Right.
But without both, you don't have a relationship.
Yeah, that's a good point. You need both to be working in harmony and sync together.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, so important to try and break that down. I think another one of the issues why it kind of feels like that invisible line has gotten a little bit more visible over the last couple of years is because our center, much like anyone listening, your center probably too, has really had a staffing crisis that has been exacerbated, you know, through COVID and like lockdowns and like everything that's happened over the 2020s so far.
Just tired, so tired.
Yeah. And as we try and move back into a better staffing position, we're trying to do more cross trainings, more, you know, sit-ins with, you know, call takers and dispatchers.
Yeah.
You know, because we've had dispatchers that have been interested in learning 911 stuff.
That's true.
And, you know, vice versa.
Yeah.
And that I think is great because when you are doing the other person's job, you get a much greater appreciation for it.
Yes, you do. You realize after you walk a mile, you're like, oh my, this is not so simple. I think I said early in one of the earlier episodes, I always had a respect for the 911, but I had no idea the discipline and the skill that was required until I had to learn to do it when I was in Denver.
Yeah.
And it changed my perspective completely. And it has helped me even now, because now I can supervise both disciplines, and I absolutely understand both. And I have no problem, telling one, don't look your nose down at that discipline, because it's more than a notion. And vice versa, where the call takers are all up in arms because of this, that, or the other. And I'm just being real, y'all, out there in podcast land. I'm not going to sugarcoat it like we're just all in love all the time, but it's true. Because, yeah, when you get this many personalities and human beings in the room together, and you add
stress
and mandatory and all of the things, and there's hardly anything open all the time for lunch and dinner, and I can't leave the premises, so on and so forth. You start adding all that up, and you just get a bunch of interesting. And so sometimes I find that
a bunch of interesting.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
that's a way to put
you
that.
get a bunch of interesting, and sometimes we have to referee between the two sides of the house.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always fun.
That's one way to put it.
But yeah, it's I think very, because like the skill of being able to keep your cool while taking 50 emergency calls back to back to back to back all night long, and not just exploding in anger on callers that are calling you every name but a good name under the sun.
I like to say everything but a child of God.
Yep. That's a skill in patience and humility, and not everyone is going to be perfect at that, of course, but that's hard to do.
It is hard to do, and you're right, and to have that empathy for the next caller after the one that just hung up called you everything but a child of God.
Yeah.
And now you have to, 911, do you need police, fire, EMS, or mental health services? And they say, oh my God, this, that, or the other. And you have to switch from whatever that was.
Completely reset yourself.
Completely reset. And I mean, you have no time to do it. That is wow.
Yeah, because especially when you're sitting there and like in our center, there's a little light that'll pop on like that everybody can see when we're holding calls.
Yeah.
And like just sort of a visual reminder of, hey, somebody might be dying if you don't get on that next call.
Yep.
And so
let's go.
Like knowing that you don't have time to like de-stress when it's high volume calls. And then also when it's high volume calls, people tend to be like, why did I have to wait online for 30 seconds?
And then that's, of course, they fuss at you for however long it takes, and then now you have to redirect them back to the real reason they called, and that is not to share with you that they pay your taxes, your salary, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. You get some interesting responses sometimes from people, especially like at the end of like a mandatory double.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. We're not going to get into those things, Gary.
No, not today. So the invisible line, like some ways to kind of fight it or to diminish it, or like classroom training. So get people early involved in, each other, like knowing each other, feeling comfortable with each other, like letting each other know that it's okay to ask questions of me.
Yep.
Then we have like welcome wagons, which are sort of in-house groups that work to do, kind of like an extracurricular activity.
It is.
Like put together like, drinks and like little fun gifts and stuff. And then you can also try to have, out of work activities like bowling and whatnot.
Yeah, team building exercises.
Yes.
TC Week is another really good one, which is coming up very, very soon.
Yes, we'll probably do an entire episode just on that, I think.
Yes, because I am proud to say we don't play around when it comes to TC Week. It's a whole week.
Yeah.
And it's a thing.
It's a whole thing.
It is a thing, and it's not stale pizza and donuts from last week sometime. We get down, I'm proud to say.
Yeah, we do quite a bit here. Well, I don't. I just enjoy it, but some people do quite a bit here.
Yes. We actually have a good time with it, but you're right. There's, the welcome wagon, and then there's, I think the biggest thing that if you're in any leadership position whatsoever, in your center and you have dedicated positions like we do, it's so important as leaders to make sure that neither side feels more important or less important than the other. I like to drop in on our classes when I have an opportunity and when I know they're very fresh, right? And I love to pop in. And I love it when I can say, okay, so what do we have in the room? Call takers and dispatch. And they say, yes, and I really like to say to them, you and you, remember that you guys are going to go through your career together. Mm-hmm. And when it starts to get hard, use each other in order to shore each other up. Mm-hmm. Because in 6 months to a year, most of your classmates may not be here any longer, and you're going to look around and you're going to go, okay, it's just me and you. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I always used to say, like, look to your left, look to your right. 2 of you will not be here.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah, unfortunately so.
I'm the last one left out of my class from 10 years ago when I came back this time. I'm it.
I think, I think I'm the only one from my class. Mm-hmm. You know, all the other ones have died off, but I'm still kicking.
They haven't died off. But yeah, but more than anything, it's a conscious effort, I think. Mm-hmm. You have to be intentional about making sure that each of your colleagues feels valued and respected for their contribution.
Yeah. And I think, you know, this is sort of a problem that requires an everyone solution. Like
Agreed.
It's, management, you know, or supervisors can't just wave a wand and make this right. Like,
no.
Like with some problems, everyone has to take the time, the effort. Doesn't have to be a whole lot every day, but just a little bit every day to, you know, go say hi to somebody on the other side of the room. Like pick out somebody, be like, I'm going to go up to them. I'm going to learn their name. I'm going to say hi to them. Yeah. And, you know, you'll I think be quite surprised by the amount of effect that even just that little gesture will bring.
Yes. Yeah. And it makes for a healthier center overall. And when you have a healthier center, a healthier workforce, the first responders in the field they're better for it, mm-hmm. and so is the general public. Yeah,
and you retain employees longer.
Agreed.
And when you retain employees, you don't have to constantly train new employees.
Yep.
And
mandatory and all the time because we're shorthanded.
Yeah, vacation gets covered.
Yep.
The cost of the business goes down because you don't have to hire so much overtime.
Yep.
You can do like not just basic needs training, but like higher level advanced training.
True.
Send
in
people
services,
to training. Yeah. I mean, anything you can do to reduce that turnover rate is worth its weight in gold. And
you're right about that being everyone, all hands on deck mm-hmm. to address it, because we like as human beings, we like to always look to management to fix all of those issues, but it can probably be solved right here at the ground level. Yeah,
and really that's, I think, almost the only place it can be solved, because you know, we as supervisors can walk around and talk to people, but that's not going to do anything to tear down an invisible wall.
Because they usually throw up a different wall when we come down the hall or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other human nature thing.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we'll do an episode from the supervisor's perspective.
That could be interesting.
It could be interesting.
Yeah.
We're interesting people, so it should be interesting.
We're very interesting people.
How many times are we going to say that?
A lot.
Okay.
But anyway, I think that's all the time we have today for The Invisible Line. We appreciate you all tuning in and listening to our podcast of Lifeline 911. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at lifeline911podcast@gmail.com or check out our Facebook group, Lifeline 911 Podcast. From Lifeline 911 Podcast, I'm Gary.
I'm Erica.
And we will see you next week.
Thank you for watching our production of Lifeline 911 Podcast. If you have any questions about the topics we discussed today, or if there's something specific you'd like us to cover in a future episode, send us your questions at lifeline911podcast@gmail.com. Stay safe out there. Until next time, this is Lifeline 911 signing off.